Can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. We got computer screens, we got masks, we got shields. It's just like so much fun to practice with. Good evening, everybody. How are you all doing tonight? Doing well? Yeah. Anyone else have a hectic day? My hectic day ended. Actually, your hectic day ended sooner than mine did because you had at least the time to get here. I was already here. So my hectic day ended about 60 seconds before I walked in here. So it's always like, these are reminders for new people, as well as those who've been at this a long time, is that just because you do meditation and you explore Buddhist teachings and it becomes a part of your life, doesn't mean you still don't have days that are just filled with absolute madness. I think for me, the beauty of this practice has been recognizing that each one of those moments of just absolute chaos and madness, you'll get through them. And in it, it doesn't always make it any easier. Right? When you're sitting there in a crazy, hectic moment, there's no Buddhist practice in that moment that necessarily changes what's going on. The only thing that changes what's going on is your perception of that actual moment. And at that time, if you can recognize, okay, that expression, this too shall pass, if you can recognize that in that madness, it will be done at some point in time, then it, for me at least, I think as a practitioner, it's allowed me to continue to stay through moments that seem just absolutely absurd. And that absurdity could be my doing, right? It could be the doing of someone else. It could be the collection of kind of karmic interaction. You ever have people that you just like karmically, like no matter what happens, the interaction between you two is just always going to be toxic? There's a lot of head shaking, right? And there are those people in our lives. And when they show up, just kind of welcome that, welcome that opportunity to practice. Anyone here lack patience? I only saw like 4 hands. The rest of you are lying, I think. But one practice for patience, which is really wonderful, is do you have somebody that when you call, very often it's a family member, friend, loved one, whatever it might be, that when you call them and you're on the phone with them, it's just like eating at you really hard? Call that person and spend 5 minutes on the phone with them. Yeah, I can see the look on your face. You're already hating this, right? This challenge I've been doing with people for years, right? So think about that person. Imagine what it would be like to be on the phone with them for 5 minutes. How would that feel? It's like torture, right? And then just when you've had enough and you're like, I just can't do this any longer, stay on the phone for 5 more minutes. The only way that we cultivate a deep practice of patience, I shouldn't say the only way, but a great way to practice the deep cultivation of patience is to put ourselves in situations that require us to practice patience. The alternative route is to create an environment around us where we feel as if patience is not required at all, meaning we're just trying to get everything perfect in our lives so we don't need patience. That'd be nice, right? Any probability or guesses at the probability of that happening anytime soon? It's not that likely. Meaning our entire lives will bring opportunities to practice patience. So for me, again, and I've already said the word a lot, but as a practitioner, I'm looking for moments and opportunities to practice all this stuff that the Buddha was teaching. And some of it just occurs naturally throughout your day. And some of it is kind of little tests or things we can bring upon ourselves to say, hey, I'm going to try this and see how I do with it. And when your skin is like just crawling and you're ready to cringe and you just want to like slam the phone down, like, all right, I can do this, it's so hard. So let me know how it goes. I gave that little kind of practice one night to at the college group one night. This one was about probably 3 years ago, and I'll never forget because one kid got up and he's like, excuse me, I have to go outside and call my mom right now. And then 3 students got up and they all went outside and called a parent because they wanted to, like, I guess, try it at that moment. So if any of you need to step outside and make a phone call, I totally understand. I won't take it personally. All right, so we'll start with the meditation practice. Hello to our YouTube fans and followers. Good to have you joining us tonight. A couple things I'll tell you as we start the meditation practice. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Same thing if you're in a chair or a bench, just trying to sit up straight. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing, but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, Return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And know that however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where we feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This is not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun and exciting. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. Very often we come in and begin to learn the meditation practice or Buddhist teachings because we spend a lot of our time in crazy, hectic, stressed out environments. And so we seek and we crave and we desire something to be different from what is our everyday life. And so there's a separation we create in thinking that there's our life and then there's Buddhist practice. But what this practice is about is really having direct perception into each moment. Not escaping or running from anything, but understanding each moment as it arises, understanding our attachments in each moment, our cravings in each moment, and understanding the impermanence of each moment, allowing us to get through it. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody you encounter every moment of your life. And that's why it's so easy. We just have to roam around and be nice to people, which is so simple for all of us, I'm sure. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets a little simpler. But as I alluded to earlier, it is a practice of patience. And I often like to remind us to, first and foremost, learn to be patient with yourself. That if your life has been a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess for a while, or you've carried lots of anger or sadness or depression or whatever that emotion is that isn't so pleasant currently, there's a great possibility we've carried that with us for a long time. And it's nice to think that in, one moment, one flash, one instance, that all of that can be gone. It's more, I think, practical to recognize that it's going to take some time to cut through a lot of that stuff that we've built up. The Buddhist teachings, they talk about, it's called Bodhichitta, Buddha nature. And the Buddha said that we are all already enlightened. So that's the good news. You're good. You're fine. I don't know what you're all even doing here. You're done. Right? We are all already awakened, as he says. But the recognition is to understand that bodhicitta, that Buddha nature, is kind of covered. And a beautiful metaphor for this is the sun. So you think of a cloudy day, right? The sun's still there. Just can't see it. Can't see it because it's hidden behind the clouds. The clouds in this metaphor is what the Buddha called the three poisons: the greed, the anger, and the ignorance. Our cravings, our desires, our attachments, these are the things that cause our suffering. So these clouds, this greed, the anger, and the ignorance, when that parts, your Buddha nature is there. So the practice ultimately is not about seeking or craving or desiring happiness or some other state of being. It's about recognizing what's actually blocking us. And that's a challenge, because we don't often want to roam around and challenge ourselves on recognizing our own greed and our own anger and our own ignorance. But for me, that's always been one of the most beneficial practices, of just being very real with what's my greed, what's my anger, what's my ignorance. And not in a way where you're judging yourself or thinking you're a terrible person or critiquing yourself, but just an honest recognition of what we as humans can work on to be kinder, gentler people to ourselves and others. And as often, and many of you know, what comes up around here a lot is, for whatever reasons, we're often a lot kinder and gentler to other people than we are ourselves. So this is an opportunity also to have a little bit of love and kindness for yourself, and don't be afraid to pat yourself on the back once in a while and recognize that you've lived quite a journey, and you're still here, so you're doing okay. So don't beat yourself up so much. Most people are not nearly as bad as they tell themselves they are. Right? So with that, I'll pause. I always prefer really just to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind, and we use the rest of our brief time this evening, and I'll address that. And again, to all of you on YouTube here, good to see you all. Linda, Cynthia, Amy, Graham, Ruel, thanks for chiming in. Feel free to say hello, connect with the others, and if you have questions or anything, I'm happy to respond to them here as well. You'll see a chat box somewhere on your screen. So thoughts, questions? Yeah.
Where would you put expectation in those? Like, I'm laughing at myself, but when I'm nice to people, I expect them to be nice back, and when I'm not, I get mad.
How dare you be human, Terrible.
That kind of expectation, the attachment, like
Craving.
our day.
Say that last part again, sorry.
It's a lot of our day.
Oh, yeah. I learned a practice years ago, which I found to be really helpful. For me, someone who spent majority of my life expecting so much of myself and others, right? There's pretty mutual there. And each person is different on kind of their level of expectation and standards they hold themselves and others, and what we hold ourselves accountable for, as well as what we expect from others. And years ago, I learned the practice of not expecting anything from anyone ever. Changed my life. Not expecting anything from anyone ever. And when we look at Buddhist teachings, what I get from this is, what are we responsible for? I mean, you said this in the way you kind of phrased your thoughts and your question. What are you responsible for? I'm asking you, Karen. What are you responsible for? I know you don't want to like really play this game because I know you well enough to know that what are you in control over of? What are you responsible for? You. That is so hard for you because it's become your way of being to just throw everything on everybody else. And think back to your question, like, okay, and let me give this in practice, we call this the Bodhisattva practice. Right? Bodhisattva is enlightened. We give. There's no notion of any giver, of any receiver, or any gift. You're not attached to any of that. And giving doesn't necessarily have to be like a physical object, like, here, have this bowl. But when you give kindness to people, I mean, the Buddha said the greatest gift, the greatest thing you can give anyone ever is the gift of the Dharma, meaning share loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. Share these things with people. When you give that, that's the greatest thing you can give. He didn't say, give all that, and then sit there and wait for everybody else to give it back to you. Just give it without the attachment or craving or desire to get anything in return. I'm not suggesting this is easy. Now, in everyday life, we have relationships with people, whether they're friendships or intimate relationships or whatever it might be. When we are giving to people and we don't receive what we want in that dynamic, I'm not saying that these teachings mean that you have to stay there. You see the difference there? If in a relationship you're not getting what you want back, feel free to leave. But my suggestion is not to stay and have all these grand expectations of getting stuff back if, in fact, that's not even happening and it may not happen. But yet you constantly crave that to happen, so then you're miserable, and then there's more conflict. And then you're stuck in this vicious cycle. Just give. It's really simple. I mean, in theory, you just give. And you know that when you give, absolutely 100%, it's not always going to come back to you. No matter how much kindness and love and whatever you give out there, it doesn't mean it's coming back to you. But when you don't get it back, how does that make you feel? How does it make you feel when you don't get back what you are giving?
That's the thing, that you're attached to that.
Say again? No, don't. You watch Judge Judy?
Unsatisfied.
I was serious with the Judge Judy part there, but unsatisfied, right? And when you feel unsatisfied, then how much do you want to keep giving? Usually not so much. So then you give, you don't get back in return, you're unsatisfied, then you don't feel like giving anymore, and now neither person is giving. That sucks. And that continues for like 18 years. You don't got to stay. But the practice of, that's funny, when you go to itch your nose, did you hit that shield? Y'all catch that? Sorry, that's funny. So just give. No expectations from anyone ever. Now, again, I just want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that you're going to walk out of here tonight and all of a sudden not expect anything from anyone. It's just not going to happen. But if you can work on recognizing how much do you expect from people, and is it fair, right? Because we often, and I'm sure, I don't know anyone really to say this, but I'm guessing most of us have had moments in our lives or dynamic relationships in our lives where others have wanted us to give more. And we just can't, or we just don't, or whatever the reason is. Yet for some reason, it's so simple for us to switch it around and want somebody else to give. Abandon expectations and just give endlessly is the practice. Yeah.
So that all very much resonates, and it's one of the concepts that just keeps making more and more sense over time. But kind of with one exception, and just curious. Again, don't know if there's a question here, but
Yeah.
family members, specifically parents.
Yeah.
How do you deal with, not having expectations for someone that you think is supposed to take care of you and always have your best interest?
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy. So whether it's family members or, very often some relationship dynamic situations, whatever it might be, yes, we can just kind of remove ourselves from that. Maybe it's a toxic work environment or friendship, whatever it be. Some things, yes, we can kind of just unplug and very easily say, I'm done with this. Other things, not so easy, right? I don't want to say we're stuck, but we're kind of stuck, right? And my answer is still the same. Just know that it's going to be that much more difficult. But again, even if you look at the way you kind of phrased and what you expressed, you said, I forget your exact words, but I'm pretty sure you said the word supposed to be. That's a heavy, label you're throwing on somebody. I mean, yes, I get it. We can say, well, parents are supposed to be this way. But what are parents also?
People.
What'd you say?
Just people.
Yeah, I heard like two things at once, so it sounded really funny.
Same thing,
Right. So they're just people. And they're people who what? Suffer. They struggle. They have challenges. They have difficulties. They've had traumas. I always think of in sitting in communities like this for the last 20 years, we're just big kids. And all of a sudden, you hit 30, 40, 50, 70, 80 years old, and everyone's like, well, you're that age, you're supposed to be this certain way now. But a lot of us are really just 5-year-olds that emotionally have never matured more than okay, I'll give us to 8, And sometimes those people who have really difficult times opening their hearts and expressing things and caring for things and all the loving kindness things that we always talk about in these Buddhist worlds, sometimes those people too become parents. And that's a whole nother level of stress and pressure and chaos on them. They had a hard enough time with their life as it was. And then they bring children into the world. Right? I've worked with children who are victims of abuse for 25 years. Right? Lots of people in here have been in those dynamics on either end of the spectrum. Parents aren't supposed to do that stuff, but they do. And so our practice is to say, can I see the suffering in them that is leading them to be this way? But we don't usually do that because we make it about us. You are that, and you're supposed to be this way to me. Instead of saying, wow, you're really suffering, and that's why you are that way to me. And then our heart begins to soften. It doesn't make it any easier or more fun. But then we recognize wow, my X-year-old parent is really miserable right now. And maybe has been for 50 years. And that's why they are that way. And when you're
and with that said, I would like to end just on a kind of a gratitude note, because honestly, my sister called me the other week and said that our dad apologized to her for the first time maybe ever that she's heard in her life, and I've definitely been embracing kind of that approach with him. So
yeah,
I do appreciate all the learnings that I do get here. So
yeah, for sure. No, thanks for sharing that, and that's it's beautiful that he can come to that place, and it's beautiful that she can embrace that, and you can hear that and feel that, and again, just another recognition of how much pain people go through, that especially when it's parents that we don't see. And we have one lens of a parent. And it's really hard as adults to see parents as anything other than parents. But yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
So, I mean, the converse of that, so as a parent, like I had expectations of my children. I mean, you know, they're adults, and it's like, why don't they communicate with me more? Why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? And somebody taught me this mantra that I say to myself a lot is expect nothing, appreciate everything. And so I started like appreciating when they would call me or when they would, and all of a sudden I found out they're reaching out more to me because I'm not, you know, and then I realized that, you know, my daughter lived in New York City during the pandemic. I felt kind of bad, like I didn't hear from her very much.
Mm-hmm.
And then later when she finally could talk to me, like she was going through some really hard stuff living there. And it's really hard when you're that far apart to kind of do that. So I say that to myself a lot during the day, you know, expect nothing, appreciate everything.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. Thank you for sharing and giving another perspective on that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone in this room can somewhat relate to somewhere along these, you know, two examples. So it's rough.
Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
Two thoughts. Your nose and your mask, it reminds me of the saying that our body cannot tell the difference between an imagined thought and like an actual thing. That's what the imagination is.
You mean when I went like that?
Yeah. So it's like you're almost satisfied just by touching your mask, like metaphysically.
Oh, it was fine. It was good. I had an itch and I
And the other thing about the parent thing, I'm in that struggle, and I always have been. But as we were all just sitting here, I kind of had the thought that, like, speaking about gifts and giving, like, if you're speaking specifically about your biological parents, what actually happened to make us all become here? Like, they gave you the gift of life. So if they're alive, dead, or deadbeat and alive, it doesn't matter because they gave you the gift of life. There's literally nothing else they could do for you better than that. So it's like, if that's already the thing that you think about every day, what do you actually want? What could be better than that? You know, that's my perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's a great. I appreciate you sharing that. It really is a beautiful way to look at a means to cultivating gratitude, because often in these situations, whether it's a parent or anyone, and we have an expectation of someone, and we're holding kind of this anger, resentment, grudge, whatever it is, we're not usually abiding in a place of gratitude. And when we have, built up, especially if it's over years, anger, frustration, resentments towards someone, gratitude is usually the last thing on our mind. And sometimes it does require just starting there with, like, I'm grateful because they brought me into this world, right? So yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, Gavin.
I was just reading this book the other day. It talked about, in a way, like to help you drop ego, was to practice giving, being of service, as a way to learn that, because that expectation part just feeds back to the ego.
Yeah.
So it's a part, and I'm actually practicing it this week, like learning to give without thinking about myself, just give. Just give, and then letting go of that selflessness.
Yeah, it's a beautiful practice. There's I remember years ago downtown, and we were taking a group to go. It was a Dharma Bum Life program. We were taking them to go to it was a food bank, and long story short, somebody came back, and their job during that evening was to take, like, food and put it in a bag. And then there was a whole group of people that were, like, going out and handing out the food. And this person shared that next night or 2 nights later how they didn't like that. Because they didn't like the job of putting the food in the bag. Well, nobody puts the food in the bag. There's no food to give. But they didn't feel like they were getting anything in return. And we're so ingrained in, I could spend hours giving examples of how our whole lives are just a series of giving and waiting for something to come back. And that's a really hard thing to unplug from. That mental conditioning, that habitual pattern of just giving and than immediately wanting something in return, that instant gratification. We spent our whole life building that. So it's tough to cut through that.
Basically, just following up on this question, when you do give, right, that kind of feeds the ego, though, right? How do you differentiate from you want to help people without feeling that ego
Right.
boost?
Yeah, it's a good question, a good point, and I think that for me at least, the way I explore this practice, there's not an exact answer to that, and there's no exact answers to anything. But I think when we give, feeling good because we're giving is not a bad thing, right? I mean, we go out, we feed homeless people, we feel good, right? But the question is, why are you doing it? And I think that's whether it's that or anything. The question is, if you're doing it simply to feel good, still good, right?
So it's intention.
It's the intention. Now, hopefully in time, even if we're kind of like, I mean, I know, again, from doing that here for years, I've had so many people say to me that the only reason they do it is because it makes them feel good. That it's not even about the other person. You got to start somewhere, right? So if you're giving just to make yourself feel good, well, maybe that's what you need. That maybe that's what we need. And maybe in time we recognize, oh, well, my giving is also helping others, right? The root cause, and the first thing the Buddha said why we suffer is greed. Number one. And the way he taught to overcome that is to give time, attention, heart, smile, hugs, whatever we can give, right? And so that practice in itself, even if early on it's making you feel good, there's nothing wrong with that. And it may take years for some people to recognize that there's somebody else involved also. So does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's kind of a little bit of the opposite. Like I want to help people, but I feel bad about feeling good. Like I feel that guilt for.
Yeah. That's just, you know, I mean, I'll wrap up here. You know, I talk about Jewish guilt. You know, I mean, we don't got enough time for that right now. You know, so there's just help people. You know, without trying not to assign that like guilt on top of yourself for any reason whatsoever. And the real practice, and I'll close on this thought, is to kind of going back to the Bodhisattva practice of no gift, no giver, no receiver, but to remove any sort of label on the action itself. Almost to the point where you're giving, but you're not even recognizing it as giving anymore. Just karmically, your action. It's just a series of actions is all we're doing. So we're not putting this story of I'm giving, I'm helping, because as soon as we give us a story of I'm giving and I'm helping, then that leads us to how do I feel? Just do moment to moment actions. Here's a can, put it in a bag, hand it to somebody. Without getting, it's like so, we get so emotionally wrapped up in everything. Right? And that's because we're human and we're going to continue to be that way. But as we're being human and continuing to get so emotionally wrapped up in everything, recognize where we're kind of getting stuck on like overthinking, I guess. Because that sounds like a lot of overthinking. So anything else before we close? Anyone sitting with and wants to share? There was a question here. Very quickly, could you help explain the concept of emptiness? Yes. So I'm going to close on that. I just wanted to make sure I addressed all the questions here. So great question. Hopefully you'll chime in either Saturday or Tuesday. I can touch on emptiness a bit. But the only thing I'll say in brief about emptiness is it's not nothingness. It doesn't mean things don't exist. The concept of emptiness really allows everything to exist. So it's not nothingness, it's everything, and nothing all at the same time. So happy to have cleared that up for you. I think it's Jamie. So, all right, so we'll close on that. We'll join palms. We'll do a transfer of merit. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained be transferred to the nearly 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic and their family and friends that continue to suffer to this day. And to all of those in Ukraine and surrounding areas that suffer at this time. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So just a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist teachings to those who show up. So thanks for showing up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our unenlightened view of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Just about every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from different Buddhist traditions. Monday through Friday, 8 to 9, we sit in the morning, 8 and then 8:30. So it's 2 25-minute sits. You can come for one, you can come for both, either way. We shut down for 16 months straight. We opened for 6, we closed for 2, and we're back open again. So hopefully we'll continue to stay open, but we still have a slightly modified schedule, but we're pretty much back to full steam ahead. So we appreciate you still wearing the masks and all that kind of stuff we're doing to keep the people who do show up here comfortable. We have a recovery sangha, which is really beautiful. We've had for about 12 years. So anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, life, whatever it might be, that meets Tuesday night downstairs right now, and Sunday up here as well. So a couple of things that are restarting. It might have been the family sangha restarts May 14th. That used to be twice a month. It'll start once a month right now. So for parents, kids, whatever it might be, that'll begin again Saturday, May 14th, and it'll continue the second Saturday of the month at 9 a.m. We do have an RSVP for that, so that's on the website. And then the Day of Silence retreat will return in, I can say next month now, next month in June. That will also have an RSVP, but it's a 4-hour silent retreat. So if 20 minutes of silence is absolute torture for you, then you'll love 4 hours. So feel free to check that out. It's 25-minute sits, meditations that just repeat for 4 hours. So if you want to know what it's like to sit with yourself, that's a great opportunity. So thanks all for being here. Be safe, travel well, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.